once the engine shed gets its roof, we look at some very small people, and also I let some castle class locomotives have a run around the layout, which they've not seen for a little while. So let's get straight on and start having a look at the engine shed. You see before you the results of the work that I've been doing on the engine shed over the last couple of weeks. At the end of the last video, I think I had produced one of the two outer panels and was going to cut up the pieces to produce the second, which obviously I have done. I've also put the cladding on, the aluminium foil. Whilst I'm on that subject, the aluminium foil I got from 4D Models, I think, but they no longer stock it. It was supplied from an American company. I'll bring the packet in so you can see the packet. The Northeastern Lumber Company. HO scale, but it's 1 millimeter width for each of the ridges. When I started to make this second part of the roof, I was thinking about having the cladding on these top pieces here, and I went to try and get some more because I don't actually have enough to complete all that, and that's when I discovered that 4D Models no longer supply that, and I couldn't find any other supplier in Europe, and I didn't really want to go to the expense for one packet of this stuff, which I think costs about $6 in from the American site. With the added costs, I didn't think that would be sensible. So I looked for an alternative, and I did come across an alternative which is slightly larger. That is scaled for 00 scale, which of course is slightly bigger than HO scale. And I'm trying to remember, Goodwood Designs, I think they're called. If you are a 00 modeler, they do appear to do quite a lot of this corrugated metal in different formats for you with your scratch building things. So it does look a rather good and useful site, which Goodwood Scenics it's called. I will put a link to Goodwood Scenics in the description to this video, so that you can go and have a look yourself. That is 1.2 millimeters, because it's obviously the slightly bigger scale. If I put one on top of the other, you'll see the difference, I think. I was surprised just how much of a difference the 0.2 of a millimeter makes, but of course over distance that is going to make quite a big difference. Which left me with something of a quandary about what would the top roofs look like. Would they actually be corrugated, or might they just be felted board essentially? And that's the look I think I'm going to go for. Using the same colour scheme, so it will still be in this sky grey colour, but and also this makes it much easier to build than sticking lots of bits of metal onto the plastic. What I've done is taken some 1 millimeter, I think slightly under 1 millimeter, but 1 millimeter card, cut a piece that's 32 millimeters wide and then scored down the center to allow me to bend it. And that obviously creates my roof. Nice and easy. That looked a bit plain. So I then, from another length of 16 millimeter wide card, cut 9 of these, which are 2 millimeters wide, again scored down the middle so that you can bend it easily. And you'll see on the left, if I just make sure we're in focus here, I've put the first 9. They're going to line up with these here, because that I know will bring them. I'm going to be out one way or the other, because obviously these are different widths to that. So I thought it was probably better to line up on the white pieces separating each window than try and line up on anything else. So I think what I'm going to do is stick all this on and then paint, simply because I have had experience of card buckling inevitably it's a water-based paint, acrylic, so the card might buckle. So what I would like to do is get everything on, get the strips on across, and all of that will help, I think, rigidity. And because I'm painting the same colour as this, should my brush slip, it won't make any difference. So I don't think I need to worry too much about that. So that's the next thing to do, get all that stuck on, and that will then be the engine shed build of the roof completed. As I said before, I've got a wall and the front piece to put on here. There's some general painting and touching up to be done in various places. And then I can build the walkway that goes through the middle and the stairs that come up through here. I've got a couple of small things to do inside to fix the wiring so that it doesn't flop about as much as it does at the moment. And that then will be it done. And I will move on to decorating it, and I'll be able to show you perhaps in a bit more detail the various bits and pieces I've got to go inside. And then I can start work on painting up all the Model U figures that I've bought to decorate around fitters and engineers and things. Very, very useful site, Model U, but well worth going to have a look. I don't think I've said I'll show you a bit later in this video. I've just realised I've recorded things out of order. I haven't yet shown you the Model U figures, have I? When you see the Model U figures, which I've bought, I don't think I mentioned how much they cost, and they cost about £4.50 a figure, which when I tell you a bit later on the price of the bag of figures, you'll see they are more expensive, but they are very, very good quality 3D printed figures. With all of that done, I think what I'm going to do now is take you to the next section where I'm going to talk about the bag of figures that I promised I was going to buy at the last one and my impressions of it. As you may be able to hear in the background, I've got two Castle class engines which are desperate to set off from Weathertop, so I'll let them run in a minute and you to see it. But I thought I would do something picking up on the last couple of videos where you saw me painting some Brescia figures which are 1 to 160, and you may recall at the end of the last video I said that I'd seen a packet of pre-painted figures 1 to 150 scale, which I'd bought to see whether that would give me people that I could just put around the scenes and not have to paint hundreds and hundreds, because I did, I think, 35 figures, and as you saw, the layout just swallowed them. And I know that a number of people are building bigger layouts where you're going to need many more people. So the packet of 150 pre-painted figures duly arrived, and my initial reaction was, oh dear. But that's probably because I was looking at them right close up. So what I've got in front of me now are three figures. On the far left is a figure from the Graham Farish Scenecraft series. So it's painted obviously at the factory, and I just admire the skill of the people that do this work, having done some of it. It's very well painted. I think it is actually 1 to 148 scale. The next to it is one of the figures out of the bag, and I'll show you the others in a moment, which is 1 to 150 scale. And on the far right is one of the figures that I painted, one of the Brescia figures that I painted, which is 1 to 160 scale. Now, it's probably not very fair in that the figure on the right is a woman who would be smaller, but I don't think actually those differences in size make much difference, because you're not going to be looking at this as, even in real life, unless you get very close, as close as you're seeing it on the camera, because I've got this zoomed in. And if I go back out to a normal, and you'll see the others, That is much more like the size that you'll see them in real life. As you can see, the packet, I've opened the packet and just spread them out. It's a real mix. Some are more coloured than others. It's intended, yes, for model railways, but also as architectural figures. So it's not worrying too much about period or style. It's just to be able to populate people around a model or something like that. This cost me £5, this packet. And if you wanted to, it would be very easy to do a little bit of touching up to add a bit more colour. Some of them are almost white. For example, this one appears to have had a few dabs around the skirt, and the painting is very rough. But I thought, well, what will that actually look like if we put them on the layout? Can you really see a difference? And I took some photos or some video earlier showing a few places where I have put one of the new figures next to one of the ones that I painted. So the person with his arm in the air in yellow, which I hope is coming up now outside the prancing pony, is one of these figures. The one next to it with the walking stick is one that I painted. I think I've gone then to Elizabeth Designs, and the lady in red looking in the window is one of these new figures, and the lady on the other side in the yellow trousers is one of the ones I painted. And then finally I put two fairly close together by the bus, and again the chap in yellow with his arm up is one of the new figures, and the fellow in red is one of the ones that I painted. And I have to say, standing where I'm standing, looking at things, you would be hard put at this distance to make much choice between them. And I think the important thing is that the colours are not garish; they're quite muted. So it's a bit like, I suppose, a bit like Impressionist painting. It gives you the impression of a person without having all the detail, but it's enough in my view. Now these cost me £5 for 100 figures, and I think, but you'll want to make your own minds up, that would be, if you were needing to populate a large layout, you could easily put the ones that are furthest away from close inspection, and go for some of the other figures where you want people really to look hard. From the other end of the spectrum, I do want to have some figures in the shed, and I want quite a few in the shed, but they're going to have to be quite good ones. So I went on to Model U, and they do obviously 3D printed figures. You may have seen them if you've been to, certainly if you've been to Whalley, taking 3D images of people and then producing figures of that person dressed as a steam driver or something. So the first one that I've got a number, and I'm not showing you them all because that will be the reveal when we finally get the engine shed onto the layout. But the first one is, let's just get this in focus, a traction inspector, and I'll bring the model into there too. There we go. Which I'm obviously going to paint. Rather handy it's on this sprue because that will make painting it a lot simpler. But the range of poses and the detail really is superb. It's going to take a bit of painting, but that will be fun to do. And the shed will be well populated, I can tell you, when I'm finished. And I've got one or two other things coming, so I think the shed's going to look quite good inside when it's done. So the two castles are desperate to make a move, so I'm going to let them make a move and give you a running session. I haven't had the castles running for a while, and they started off, I've tested them obviously, they're looking forward to running. So I'll let the running session go, and then we can come back to close up this week's episode, or this fortnight's episode of Elvenhome. Well, I hope you enjoyed that running session. It was great fun to run the locos, or is great fun because they're running still. I'd forgotten how good these Castle class locomotives are, and the quality of the sound files on them. The noise from them is really quite something. So that pretty much brings this episode of Elvenhome to a close. The work over the next couple of weeks, I think, principally is going to be doing the decoration of the engine shed. I do want to start thinking about the scenic work around High Elven. I need to settle in my mind how I'm going to close off and create the hill on which the bungalows will be standing. And I also think there's not enough bungalows, but we'll have a look at that when we come to it. So until I speak to you again in about a fortnight's time, if you've liked the video, please do give it a thumbs up. That's always very good. And please subscribe. It'd be great to have you along as you see the layout developing and the work that's got to be done at the tail end of the layout. And if you've got any comments, of course, well, please do let me have your comments, because they're always very welcome and always very helpful. But until I speak to you again in about a fortnight's time, that's bye-bye from me. Bye-bye.